At the end of 2023, I picked up my 1998 Nissan Stagea 25T RSV that I imported. It was December at the time, and in Pennsylvania, that means salty roads, so I didn't want to take it out. That, and it had a list of issues that made it not really drivable, most of which I didn't know about until I picked it up at the port. So being that the only two things I could do were stare at it all winter or work on it in the barn, I got right into tearing it apart. This timing belt looks like it was on its last leg, probably the original belt from 1998. And the valve covers were so covered in corrosion that when I popped off the intake side valve cover, it fell off of it like it was covered in flour. Just look at that. By giving the timing belt a flex, you can really see just how bad a shape it was in. Now I'm going to strip down the cylinder head, lap the valves, and change out the valve stem seals. You can see me using the valve stem seal pullers here. This step is basically the only reason I pulled the head, but lapping the valves and installing a new head gasket along with this will do this engine good. Jumping back to an issue I spotted when pulling the engine out of the Stagea, the coolant neck on the intake had rusted out inside the upper radiator hose. Obviously, this would only get worse and needed replaced, so I started battling it to get it pulled out. Now that every part of this engine that is coming off is fully stripped, it's time to throw them in the hot tank and give them a boil to get all the grease and grime off. Wait, I forgot to scrape the old head gasket material off the head and lap the valve. I like to clean the carbon off the valves before lapping them to ensure the seats are clean before I start. Now it can go in the hot tank, and when I power wash it after, I'll know all the valve grinding compound will be gone. After the hot tank, while the head is still hot, I'll give it a light scrub and a generous power wash to get any remaining degreaser off before it dries. This thing looks brand new. I'm actually surprised how well this turned out. Time to start reassembling the head. Using my drill press like this was the quickest way I dreamed up to get it done. My fancy valve keeper tool wasn't going to be in for another week, and I didn't have time to wait to get this done. The head is done, and it's time to clean the rest of the parts, which honestly I probably cleaned at the same time as the head, but hey, we're gonna watch it now. All the parts of the engine that can be seen when looking in the engine bay are going to be blasted and powder coated. I'm using a soda blast, which is much safer for engine parts, and I can power wash them after blasting and wash it all out. Here you can see a before and after where I blasted on this valve cover. I know it may be overplayed, an RB with red valve covers, but this red just looks so good. I couldn't help myself. Every little bracket I took off also got a makeover in satin black, and these charge pipes got a special touch with gloss black to really make them pop. Back to the engine. I'm removing this water jacket on the back of the block that was corroded through. It wasn't leaking yet, but we all know this would become an issue down the road, so let's fix it now. Some people might not like that I use a brass barb fitting, but it will do the job exactly the same, and the replacement fitting was $60 for an OEM, and I couldn't justify that. Similar to the hose barb, OEM head bolts were more expensive than ARP head studs. So guess what this RB's getting? A new OEM head gasket goes on, and look at that clean rebuilt head. Chef's kiss.
That was the most satisfying noise ever.
Yes, it was. I'm going to slather the cam bearings and engine assembly lube before sticking the cams in, and a thin film of RTV goes on the new cam seals before tightening down the cam caps. I pulled the oil pan to make sure everything in there looked good, and the camera died. So let's clean the oil pump we took off after the camera went on break. The oil pickup tube and all the oil pan hardware are going to join the oil pump in the ultrasonic bath. Look at the difference when these parts come out. This is one of my favorite parts of builds. Also, don't worry. Right after pulling the oil pump out of the cleaner, I ran oil through it until it came out clean to make sure the pump itself wouldn't rust internally or pump cleaner into the engine. Time to scrape and wire brush the RTV off the oil pan before giving it a scrub and power wash. Even though the RB oil pan is completely baffled, right here it's got this perfect little gully where when you blast water in there after you scrub everything out, all the water runs right out of there with very little resistance, and any little piece of silicone or dirt or anything that would have been left back in there flows right out. This is where I discovered soda blasting can restore old zinc plated parts really well. Look at the before and after on those transmission braces. This fresh clean oil pump is getting a new main seal, then getting bolted back down in place. A new OEM timing belt will finish off the long block nicely. What you didn't see here was me pulling the belt off and retiming the engine another 2 times because I was super paranoid I was going to get it wrong. By turning the engine over a few revolutions, I am showing the engine is timed properly and the valves are not making contact with the pistons. Now is the part of the video where I go on an O-ring hunt to replace every one I can find. So this used to be a rubber O-ring back in 1998, but it's now so hard I can't pick it out, but I can just sit here and spin it. It's essentially just plastic now. I found the best way to remove this is to just stab it and it breaks. That's how hard it is. Do it again just for entertainment's sake and not into my hand, hopefully. Fresh new O-ring installed. And this one's actually pliable. It's got to pop on that shaft. There we go. Gave the exhaust manifold gasket surfaces a wire brushing to clean them up. Speaking strictly on before and after satisfaction, this was one of my favorite parts of the build, rebuilding the fuel rail. The injectors got new O-rings and internal filters, which I used the vise to press in place. And the rail itself got fully stripped and soda blasted, which made it look amazing. As you saw earlier, when the oil pump got a new front main seal, the rear main seal is also getting replaced. The oil pickup tube gets a new gasket before applying RTV to the oil pan and bolting it back down. This is where the build is starting to come together. The turbo is getting bolted back down with all new copper crush washers on the oil and water lines, and you can see the engine for the first time with the powder coated valve covers and the new timing belt. Six new spark plugs are getting installed. Always make sure to double check the gap before installing. You'll see here I even powder coated the heat shields to elevate the appearance of the old rusty things. And before you say it won't work, I'm editing this almost 4 months after this was filmed. I'm also sitting in the car right now for this audio. And those heat shields still look exactly the same. Replacing as many gaskets on the turbo as I can, just like the engine, and once it's all together, it's really looking good. I'm installing a new OEM oil filter before the intake goes on so you can actually see it get installed. And it's time for the intake to get bolted on. And a new thermostat as well. Finishing up the fuel rail to install it. The injectors have new O-rings and filters, and the rail has new hoses and clamps, which I forgot to film until it was on the motor. Putting some RTV in the hole for the new water jacket before hammering it into place. A really big shout out to my dad for his help with this. I gave him some dimensions for the part since I couldn't find a replacement, and he knocked it out on the lathe the next day. This new water jacket fit perfect. It had enough press fit that combined with the RTV, I was confident it wouldn't leak, but it wasn't so tight that it would crack the intake manifold when trying to hammer it in. This is the first time I show it, but I tried to use new hardware pretty much everywhere. Old corroded bolts can completely ruin the look of a fresh build, and I love how fresh zinc looks. There's a slight difference in color between the throttle body and the rest of the intake, as I couldn't strip the throttle body to powder coat it, but I soda blasted it clean as best I could and called it a day. I installed a new turbo intake since the old one ripped when removing it. It was worn out and cracked anyway. And the recirculation tube got soda blasted and powder coated clear to show off that raw metal. Last thing was to mount the stock blow off valve, or whatever you like to call it. And I forgot to order a gasket, so I had to cut my own. And the new PCV bushing showed up just in time. Now that the engine is good to go, we need to sort the transmission out.
That's not intimidating at all. I know what everything in there is. So we have to take off this whole valve body, take the filter off, take the valve body off. There's one of the solenoids on the top, but I don't have to change that one. All the ones I need to change are on the bottom. So there's actually almost no clutch material in this pan. Here, if you see me drag it. Oh, I hit the magnet. Anything that is in here is on the magnet, and it's little metal fragments, probably from the planetary gears. If you have a brand new manual, it'll do the same thing as it wears off all the tiny little disparities on the gears. Hopefully this will keep all this stuff clean sitting on the side of the transmission. Come on, zip tie, help me out here. See that? I'll grab another zip tie. Woo! Alright. Awesome. It was the pad to an accumulator spring, which I knew was there. Ta-da! These are the solenoids I need to get to. Just give her a little wiggle. Never pulled this out, so. But wiggling always works. Okay.
So if you're ever dealing with kind of scummy resellers and they scrape part numbers off so that you can't look it up, just remember, these barcodes still work. This will still pull up a part number. I paid 460 bucks because I couldn't find a part number. Dudes are trying to hide this kind of stuff. Googled around a lot, but again, couldn't find the OEM Nissan part number. Paid 460 bucks for this shipped, and then scanned this barcode, found that I could get it from Japan for about 150. So that's why this is a thing. It's a pretty decent business. Just like everything on the engine, I want everything in the transmission to be cleaner than when I took it out, even the oil pan. The engine and transmission are both ready to go back into the Stagea. Finally, it was time to pull the car back inside and reunite it with its engine. Unfortunately, because the barn is on a hill, I have to winch the car in, although using my trailer hand winch sped this up a bit. I do hope one day to build myself a shop where I can just roll cars in. We interrupt this time lapse to show you how freaking close this motor is to not fitting. This is how close the cast is to the front part of the engine bay. And here is how close the rear of the transmission is to a support on my lift. I already cut a front part out to make the trans go through it. It was much harder to get it out than it is to be putting it in right now. But it fits by about an inch. So right now the car is actually too far back on the lift. I get a little nervous sometimes about tipping the scissor lift, but this is how close it is, and the engine is as far back as I can get it. Look at all that room. Well, I struggled last night till 11 to get this engine in, which I did. You might notice it's sitting a little low though. I realized this morning when I came out, I forgot to put the dipstick tube for the trans on. So it's dropped down a little bit. I had to squeeze through this tiny gap between the pallet and this frame rail. I had to shoot it up through there, up under the heater. Wow, I hate when the wind does that. It's like a ghost slam a door. Everybody knows this feeling if you worked on cars before, just taking everything in under the car. I'm supposed to be out of here by March 31st. That's the house and the garage, and it's the 28th, and I'm still wrenching on a car with a fully functional shop. So I'm not gonna be sleeping a lot the next couple days, because I mean, like, here, listen. Everything is still in here. I'll just take shelter from all my problems under the car. It'll protect me from all my problems. This is kind of one of my problems.
Sometimes I get so focused I keep forgetting to make a video, but I just dialed in the alignment.
I chucked on a new fuel filter with all new fuel lines, just like on the fuel rail. I also took the opportunity to flush the radiator with a hose and blast all the bugs out of the cooling fins to ensure it could cool the engine down effectively.
Got her filled with oil. Testing for leaks with just water. I've spilled enough coolant on the floor looking for a leak, get my hands all sticky, so test with water first. You can always drain it, put coolant back in. So far there's no drips, but nothing is running. Fuel pump fuse back in. Let's check for leaks on that fuel system. Alright, now I'm here in the fuel pump. So far I don't see any leaks. Always do your fuel leak test when the engine is ice cold. Obviously, I don't have to tell you why. There's no drips on the floor. I think we're good. I kind of want to run it a little longer just to be sure. I think one of the biggest bummers is these beautiful gloss black charge pipes, which I need to get all the fingerprints off of again, are going to be completely covered over by the air filter cover with that little intake that comes out of the hood for cold air. Also, it might officially be time to get all the paint writing off of the windshield, being as it doesn't look like a hunk of junk under the hood anymore. Just a little bit of acetone and it no longer looks like it's fresh off the boat. Before I stick the bumper on, let's just do something quick about these headlights. Much better. These aren't totally perfect. There's a little bit of fading, but it's on the inside of the lens. So without popping the lenses off and fixing it, which again, having to move in one day, I don't have time to do that right now, but that's much better than the yellow. So, little tiny drip on the floor. I was worried about this. The stock oil cooler, heat exchanger, or whatever you want to call this thing, it leaked when I got it. I cleaned everything up really well and I couldn't get a new O-ring in time. I knew this was probably going to be an issue, but I can reach it sort of easy from down here. But again, I had just previously said that we're supposed to be out of here by the end of March, so that's March 31st. I'm going to have the shop packed up at the end of the day and be on our way to Tennessee, where we're going to be living. It's the 30th, so I need to start tearing apart this shop. You guys are about to see the last project to ever roll out of this garage, and it's a barn, but last project that's gonna have been built in here. Sitting here running diagnostics because I got to check engine light in the Stagea. Double sunroof, kind of sick. It's kind of a vibe. It's a 25-year-old vibe, but it's new to me, so pretty chill. I have cars with sunroofs, but I don't have cars with two sunroofs. So we're finally down here in Tennessee. Been reunited with my little Sentra. As I said, the oil cooler leaks just a tiny little bit. So there's the one we took out. New OEM O-ring, and even one for the bolt that comes along with the kit.
So this is what we want, and this is what we didn't have with the last O-ring. It sticks out past the end when it's pushed all the way in, which means it's going to have a little tension when it's bolted down. The last one spent 25 years being squished, and it didn't have that tension in it anymore, and had taken shape of the space that it was in, and it would drip. Let's go ahead and give it a little cold start, see how this transmission's working. Alright, let's pull out here. We are in first. It just grabs second, give it a little throttle. You can see it shift, built-in boost. Grabs third, grabs fourth. Look at that, everything's working again. I wanted to get a matching set of wheels for the Stagea to put some fresh tires on, and although the 17s looked pretty good, I thought 18s would be the perfect size. I picked these G35 wheels up for cheap with black plastic dip on them, only to be surprised that there was purple underneath. One of the wheels had purple plastic dip that took twice as long to remove as all the other wheels. Not sure what magic they used on that one, but it was a struggle. I don't know why this wheel is completely unaffected, but these are... I don't get it. Alright, these have all been completely stripped of any plastic dip. This one has just been washed to get all the chemicals off of it completely. Other than the Nismo stickers, which actually doesn't look awful, but it's definitely not going to keep. They look pretty good. That factory finish is nice, actually. Alright, the wheels are about in as decent a shape as I can get them without refinishing them. Obviously, I don't have a shop anymore. I'm using a tire machine on the skid underneath an awning to get this done. Beads are cleaned up, wire brushed, no old rubber residue. About to slap in a new valve stem and chuck some new tires on. All four wheels have new tires mounted. These have rotation going this way for the driver's side, and those have rotation that way for the passenger side. Look at that tread. Nice and deep. I love new tires. It's so nice. Something about it. Just like it.
Can you hear the sound? Can't stop us now. We're not back in time, but what we're doing. Things are about to change, it's evolution. Voices shake the ground, you feel it moving. We're the revolution. Can you hear the sound?
Is that cool?